Kia ora, good morning. I've been up for a little while, but I have to tell you about what's just happened. Now, I'm not saying that this is absolutely 100% definite. I'm not saying it's 100% definite, but I'm just telling you, right? Because I've just been talking to my sister. So I was telling her about this dream that I had, where I had come to visit my sister in her house, and she had all this food on the table, and she had this soup cooking on the stove, and everyone was just waiting for the soup to be ready before we could eat at the dining table. And I had come to visit her. It was her house. And when I walked in, I was like smelling this beautiful soup that was cooking, and I just couldn't wait to eat her soup. But she was waiting on the chickpeas soaking in the broth before she could, like, I don't know, put it through the blender or whatever it was, but it smelled amazing. And everyone wanted this soup. And I was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room, and my son Thomas was sitting at the at the table by the food, which would be Thomas, and my nephew Zion was standing on the other side of the table with Thomas. Both of them are Capricorns. Um, and my little nephew River, my sister Laurie's grandson, who my sister Erin has like stepped in to be his nana. He was playing in the lounge with Gabriel and my nephew Jacob, the one who's going to run my comic book Toy Kingdom. And they were like messing around with him and playing around, and that she had a fire going. And I was telling my sister about this dream, and then I'm sitting there drinking my coffee, and I thought, hang on a minute. I went back to her and I said, Curious George was playing on the telly. You had Curious George playing, and I said, and it was an episode where they were in upstate New York. And I was explaining to her about how they live in the city, but that the man with the yellow hat also has a property in upstate New York. And I just sort of said to her, oh, maybe I'm being told to look at upstate New York. I said to her, that's like Sleepy Hollow. And, parts of Hocus Pocus were made around there. And we were talking about that. I had shown her some videos on YouTube of Sleepy Hollow and the film location for Hocus Pocus and all that, and saying, we could move around here. And she was saying, this would be like my dream come true. And I was like, well, I'm going to make your dream come true. So, and I was saying to her, the dream basically just means like us coming together as a family. I said, because soup, it was in the kitchen, and kitchen is the heart of the home. Kitchens represent the heart, and it's the women who take care of the heart. A woman cooking in the kitchen for her family, and that the woman is the heart of the home, and the man keeps the heart beating, right? He hunts and gathers for his family, and then she prepares it all in the kitchen out of love. And I always used to say to my boys that mothers, the magic ingredient that goes into any food that a mother cooks is love. That love is the most powerful spell. And when a mother and a wife cooks for her husband and kids, and that she's putting the magic of love in every mouthful. So I'm telling my sister all of this. And then I remembered about the Curious George thing. Also, soup. Have you heard that saying, soup for the soul? Soup is healing for the soul. Soup, like, fixes everything from colds, but, it's soup for the soul. But she had a fire going. The house was warm. The boys were all like, I said to her, it was like, it just felt so natural and so calm and so peaceful, and we were all just quietly, patiently waiting for the soup, but we all really wanted the soup. Even though there was all that food on the table, we couldn't wait for the soup. So when I remembered the Curious George thing, I said to her, Curious George is special for the boys and I. I said when Chris was down in England for those months working and we were in Scotland by ourselves, Curious George was very special for us. And I said it was around that time when I collapsed the second time and almost died from my hernia situation, and he had to leave England and come back to Scotland because, I'd almost died. And then we ended up leaving there and going to Boldini, because then he started his own company, Red Radiant Media, and then you know what happened after that, and then we moved to Glasgow, blah, blah, blah. It was in Glasgow when I had that experience where I was sitting in bed having a cup of tea reading a book, and my body, I had like that astral situation where my body started rising, and I landed at the foot of my dad. Remember, he was dressed like the Egyptian, and he didn't say anything. He just pointed, and when I turned and looked, he pointed to that old Victorian theatre. And when I walked into the theatre, the movie screen was scrolling like all these names. And this was 2013, I never understood what it meant. However, at the start of that dream, when I landed at my dad's feet, my sister Erin was just starting to float up and away. This was getting spoopy. So I was telling her about how special Curious George was, and I said, and then when I met Martin, when I started writing to him in 2013, we'd been pen pals for 3 years, and then when I told him that my marriage had ended, I started getting to know him, and then, after a few months and that, he asked me to be his girl, and we took it slow from there and blah, 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 and I was an idiot. But because he was in New York, I always took it as a sign, because I used to say to him, and I've got the letters under the bed because we were discussing it, how watching Curious George always gave me like this weird familiar feeling. And I was just saying to my sister, do you remember when Dad used to talk about he was convinced in his past life he was from New York? Because my dad had this uncanny ability to know everything about New York, especially like Brooklyn and downtown New York, like Manhattan and all that. He knew those streets like the back of his hand. He would watch stuff. I remember we were watching something and he knew the name of the shop and the street and the blah, blah, blah. And then when it came up and he was right about it, we all just looked at him like, and he was like, yeah, I know, because I used to live there. And that's what I'm saying. This is why I had to study this stuff as a kid, because I lived in a family where the weird and wonderful was happening all the time, and I needed to understand why and how. And my dad was the catalyst for it all, especially like reincarnation. I was fascinated with reincarnation by the time I was like 5, 6, 7 years old because of my dad. So I just assumed that because Martin was from New York, that familiar, nice, warm feeling I got in the gut of my stomach was because, my teacher had said, welcome to the land of A's. She said the man that I was going to be with kind of looked First Nations. He looked Indigenous, and he'd be waiting for me on bended knee. And the first photo I ever got of Martin, he was down on, like, kind of doing a Latin King down on his knee thing with long dark hair, and he looked First Nations. He said people always used to think he was Native American. He does have some Native American in him. In fact, the last prison he was at was on the territory of where his ancestors and that were from. He's also like Irish, Nicaraguan, I think Portuguese as well. When his family roots and that. So I thought, well, he must be the one. But I don't think, now looking back, that she was seeing him. I think she was seeing my connection to my past life. because I found out that my ancestors were, that my mighty ancestors were Mesoamerican, and my dream with Head of the Eagle, I think she was seeing Head of the Eagle, and I mistook Head of the Eagle for Martin, and I just said to my sister, it's almost like Martin was the glitch in the Matrix. And I'm wondering whether this dream that I had is like everything's been rewound back to the beginning, but erasing Martin, removing him from the equation, and like my students and all the trouble that he brought into my life, and getting to start again. I mean, I had a client who had a apartment for rent in the same building that Chelsea Clinton lived in. There were a couple of other people that had apartments there, and she ended up becoming a student of mine. And she left New York to go over to California for work, and she was offering to rent me her place in New York City that overlooked Central Park. But then I got with Martin, and I think she didn't feel too comfortable with him there, because of his past and everything. But of course I was like, but that's my man, and being an idiot. And then I just said to my sister, I'm just going to check something out. I'm going to have a look at properties and stuff like that, just in case this is like a signal that maybe Martin was my coyote. If you know about coyote, trickster. And the coyote in Native American mythology, they come along to tempt your fate. And depending on how you react to your interaction with the coyote decides your fate. And I was yanked out of that relationship faster than you could think. As it was getting closer to the boys and I getting to America, remember I had that dream in October of 2019 where I fell out of the darkness and landed at the foot of Head of the Eagle and the buffalo, and we walked across the plains and across the river to my sons holding the baby, and I said, the children saved my husband. I'm wondering, at the time, I thought Martin was Head of the Eagle in the dream. I thought, oh, this is me, we're going to Martin. But then it was literally right after that, he left. And then I found out through Beth and Nikki that he was in a relationship with Courtney. And I had this massive freak out, and I said to Beth, but she's a child groomer. And I told Beth the situation, knowing that she knew what was going on. I knew it was all a setup by that point, but they didn't know or had forgotten that Courtney was a child groomer. And yeah, so I've just had a look. And now it's like, oh my God, I just said to my sister, I just sent her some things, and I said to her, oh my God, this is perfect. This is perfect. What I was looking at right in front of me was absolutely just bloody perfect. I said to her, all I'd have to do is go and check it out, and if I like what I see, I'll find an architect and a landscaper, and then we can draw up plans. And then I can take those plans to see if I can get planning permission, where hopefully I wouldn't have to chop down any trees to make clearing, because some of them look like the clearings in that we wouldn't need to chop anything down, but the Kelly Forest is right there. And then I just keep thinking, message in a bottle. Remember at the end, after Tardowski gets dragged off to jail by the people who realised that the fairy was protecting children the whole time, she turns into an eagle and puts the children on her back and goes flying into the forest. where she sits on that throne made from a tree stump, and then all the bears and wolves and deer and all that, beavers, and come out of nowhere and put the crown on her head. And it's made up of like shells and leaves and bark and moss and, you know, all of that, feathers. And she takes her place on the throne as Mother Earth or Mother Nature, or, you know, the Queen of the Cali Forest. And I've just had a look at quite a few, like I I couldn't, like, I would have to check them all out because they're all friggin', they're like, they're, I'm getting excited, so I'm stuttering. There wasn't just one property that was like, yeah, I could work with that. There were like dozens. So, like, if one fell through, there were multiple other options that I could work with. And if I could get planning permission, but I said to my sister, I can't see why I wouldn't get planning permission because all I'm building is like a summer camp that's not a summer camp because they'll be there for a year, you know, from the sort of towards the end of winter to the start of winter, the kids will be there for like a year. And I said I'm basically building like an art school artist retreat kind of retail hotel resort area that's going to be walled off, that's remote enough that, you know, people have a beautiful drive. Because one of the reasons why I wanted to set it away from the populated areas is that part of the healing is in the journey to get there. They'll drive through the autumn leaves, they'll drive through like the winter landscapes, and, you know, the budding spring and all of that. Absolutely fantastic for artists and photographers and people wanting to be inspired while writing their poetry and their music, and, you know. And I found dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of properties in upstate New York that I could absolutely work with. See, in Massachusetts, I found one. In Maine, I found one. In South Dakota, I found one. In Rhode Island, I found none. But I just said to my sister, well, you know, I said, we'll fly to New York and I'll employ a driver and he can drive us around all like the New England states and stuff. I said, and then when I find somewhere and I'm like, yep, this is what I want to buy, this is where I want to build, I said, then I'll get my PR manager to get me around doing all the circuits and interviews with the radios and like morning TV shows and all of that, where I can hit the media circuit and let people know, hey, I'm building this school. I need kids who are this, and this. You know, send me your bullied, send me your kids that don't want to live anymore, send me your kids that have been diagnosed with all of this, that, and the other, who have like an interest or a talent in the arts and music and entertainment and that, who are okay with moving away for a year and, you know, coming and learning with the best. And we're going to, in return, make games and movies and TV shows and that on my streaming service. And, you know, all the first jobs are going to get offered to veterans through the George Callahan Trust. And then we're going to help traffic kids through the Kids Helping Kids Foundation, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And because that's where my sister comes in, because she's going to be my stylist. So I said she would have to be with me by the time I got to America, because I don't want to do like the media circuit looking like a dick. And then we're going to work on like our clothing range together that I can sell in my boutique and that. And basically, I wasn't expecting that. And when I just was telling her about that dream, I was not expecting all that to come out of that dream. And I remember I had a dream about the Starmen coming up out of the grates of Broadway and being told New York backs you. 100%. And when me and the, what I call Brennan Taniwha, King Water Dragon, well, yeah, what did he say? I was flying over New York and the kids were running and clapping and cheering. People were running and clapping and cheering. And New York backs you, or New York supports you, whether you know it or not, or something like that. It's documented everywhere, that dream. So I just said to my sister, was I always supposed to go to New York, but just not with Martin and my students? Was I always destined to go there? But the glitch was, I thought it was with Martin, but it was never, he was never supposed to be involved. And so it created a massive glitch in the matrix and tore a fabric in the whole of time, tore a fabric in my timeline, because he was the coyote. So erase the glitch and everything moves smoothly. And then I remembered a dream that I had as well, where we were watching, I had been sent snippets of like the first shots of Message in a Bottle, where, but it had a Canadian flag. We were watching, we were standing in a hotel room in New York City, and we were watching, they'd shot the first few shots of Message in a Bottle, and the people that were helping me make it were, this is what we've got so far, what do you reckon? And me and my boys were standing there with somebody else watching it going, oh my God, this is going to be amazing, this is incredible. And in the dream I was talking about how Martin was off on the sidelines and he was like sad and angry and pissed off that he wasn't involved because he knew he'd blown it. I can put screenshots up of that conversation, of that dream as well. And I said to my sister, once I find a property, the first thing I need to do is set up my IT company, my games company, and my obviously my production company. But I said to her that these are things that I can outsource or get them to work from home once I've got everyone in position, and they can do all the stuff in the background while I'm doing the media circuit. But I reckon I could have everything built and up and running within a year once I got planning permission. But if I can find an architect that can work around what it is I'm trying to build based around what it is I'm interested in, he may have to come with me to look at some of the land so that we can walk around and he can get a feel and idea. Because ideally, I don't want to have to chop any trees down. I'd cry. I always get emotional when I see trees get chopped down. But there were places there where there were gaps in between the trees where it's like, okay, I might need to slightly change the plan, but that's why I need a good creative architect. If I can sit down with him and say, this is what I want, and then he does it, and then we go and check out these properties, and he's like, well, okay, well, I just would move this here and do that there, and blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, there were a lot of these properties where my son could have his boat and learn to sail, and my other son could fish. And I could let people come and fish, and people could come and stay at my hotel and fish, and people could come and stay and fish and, cook everything at the barbecues. And, we can, for our fish-based menus and that, we could put the seal of pride to say locally sourced. So now it's like, oh my God, was Martin the glitch? Was I always supposed to go to New York, but just not with him and what he was bringing to the table? And that by going back and fixing the glitch, the road has been shown. And it looks, remember I put up those posts the other day and I said, this road leads, a road like this leads me to where I'm supposed to build. They are the kind of roads in the areas. There were dozens, like a glutton for options. And with New York being democratic, they're not going to have a problem with me bringing these kids in, especially if they're trans, you know, dealing with their sexuality and being bullied for it. Writers, artists, musicians, game makers, all that sort of thing, that's right up a Democrat's alley, isn't it? Wow. And I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it's pretty freaky. And if that is the plan, once Trump is gone and all my obstacles are moved out of the way, I am not going to be, I'm not going to be disappointed. I won't be like, oh, nah, oh, well, I'll be like, yeah, come on, let's do it. Because it's like friggin' Sleepy Hollow hocus pocus territory. Even my sister was like, oh my God, that would be a dream come true. I said to her, and then like we could have days where we could go into New York City, walk around Central Park, do a bit of shopping. I mean, I'm not into shopping, but she is. I'd go there for her because the thing is, you know, we need to be inspired with my fashions for our designs. Oh my God. So yeah, so I can't believe it. And then my son also had a dream many years ago where he said that we were in Central Park and a UFO that was being flown by Rocio flew overhead and it crashed, I think. And the people of New York, when standing in Central Park, put him on a throne and put a crown on him and were carrying him through Central Park clapping and cheering. And he specifically said they were Christians. They were all Christians. And he's like, you know, because we didn't sort of really believe in God then. And he specifically said they were Christians from New York who held him aloft because he'd done something. And then we got to this restaurant and people stood and clapped and cheered for us. And the restaurant owner like beckoned us in, and he specifically said Chris and Martin were with us, but now I know why. And the restaurant owner beckoned us in and like gave us a seat, and people were clapping and cheering, and they offered us a free meal. And I'd always thought, well, you know, that's because we're going there, and you know, Chris is going to be a part of it because of the whole deal that we had. But nah, now I understand why they were there. Now I get it. I've never forgotten that dream. So now I'm thinking, holy flip flop, Batman. Maybe we were always supposed to go to New York, but the screw up was that I thought it was to be with Martin, but it was never supposed to be with Martin. And if I moved to New York, it'll be easier for me to get my annulment because we got married in New York. So, wow, I can't believe that. So I just had to put it out there. I can't stop thinking, like, there were dozens. If one sale fell through, there's so many options. It's like a kid in a candy store kind of options. I just never looked at New York because I never thought I would go back there because of Martin. But of all the other places where I've been looking, and trust me when I say I've been looking for years, even before all of this happened in 22, I was looking at properties for sale in America. it was all like there'd be a couple of places in a state, but in New York, there's dozens, 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 dozens. One website, there was like over 5,000 options. So I'll make a list and narrow it down to like maybe 20. And if they don't work, then I'll check out the other 20. But it looks like this is where I'm being told, have you thought about here? Have you thought about just looking at this place over here? I'm in shock. All because of a dream about soup. So, yeah, and I said to my sister, do you remember when Dad used to swear black and blue? He was from New York. And I always thought, Curious George, because my dad's name is George, I always thought maybe that special connection that I felt to New York through watching Curious George when my boys were little was because of Dad. So, yeah, but I think that I misunderstood my teacher's prophecy when she said about who I was going to end up with. I think she was seeing Head of the Eagle, and I mistook Head of the Eagle for Martin. Now, Head of the Eagle could be anyone. It doesn't have to be a First Nations person now or anyone with black hair or anything, but his past life. And because I've always said that the grandmother tree dream that I had, and there is literally a park in upstate New York where there is a grandmother tree, by the way, because when I was looking for the grandmother tree, the first place it led me to was New York. And there's a place in New York where they have a special tree that is called the grandmother tree. Because my students were helping me try and find where this grandmother tree was, not realizing that she was symbolic of my family tree, of, like an ancestral, cosmic grandmother tree sort of thing. I thought it was a literal tree. But it did originally first lead me to New York. But I've been having that dream since I was 4 or 5 years old. And I always said that the reason why I never forgot that dream because it was leading me home, back to Head of the Eagle, who I know that when we were together many lifetimes ago, I died. I got shot by an arrow and fell off my horse, and I was pregnant, and I died. I died in his arms, and I had been dreaming about him ever since. I was like a little girl, and I always said that I've been trying to find my way back to him ever since. He could literally be anyone, and I'm not saying that it's like he could be as white as snow now, but in his past life he was my Head of the Eagle. I don't know what to say. I'm in shock. Now I can't stop thinking about the potentials for some of those properties. And the thing is, it wasn't actually that expensive. Like all the properties, they weren't that expensive. I could just buy it outright. So, yeah, it's like the wheels are turning, eh? And the one place I never thought to look. I mean, I had said to my sister, how about like round Sleepy Hollow territory, Hocus Pocus territory, but I never actively looked because, I mean, I didn't think there'd be anything there that I was looking for, and boy, was I wrong. So let's see what happens, eh? And I'm not saying it is, but I'm documenting it. We'll just wait and see what happens. But yeah, I had to document it because that was freaky. So I'll speak to you later. Ka kite.